Hi everyone, welcome back to the Clara CFO Group channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about HR topics than really finance topics, but all of this ultimately relates to your finances. So we wanted to cover the COVID paid sick leave on this channel because this is another benefit both to employees and also to employers that we want you guys to know about. So what I've done is I've brought in an HR specialist, Niki Ramirez. I actually work with her on some of my clients, and she was the one who actually brought up this topic to me. I got an email and it said, hey, did you know about these changes that happened with ARPA, specifically around COVID paid sick leave? And I said, no, I actually didn't know anything about this. So I thought if I didn't know about it, maybe you guys wouldn't know about it, and maybe it would be helpful for all of us to know about it together. So what I've done is I've brought her on. We're going to do a quick interview and we're going to talk through COVID paid sick leave. What is it? Who needs to know about it? Who does this apply to? Who needs to be paying attention? And then how you can go about claiming it, because there's actually some tax credits that we can get when we pay people on this COVID paid leave. Okay, so I'm not going to go any further into it. We're going to try to keep this short and sweet. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and this type of information is helpful to you, please go ahead and subscribe. Please like the video and also click the little notification button next to that subscribe so that you can be notified whenever we have new videos. All right, well, let's go in and talk to Niki. All right, well, Niki, thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you, and I hope you're going to help us all understand COVID paid sick leave because it seems to be a little bit of like, ooh, we're not really sure when we can use it or what would really qualify. So could you give us just kind of a high level, what is COVID paid sick leave and maybe who should be paying attention right now?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Hannah. So COVID sick leave is a particular type of available sick leave that offers employers, so small business leaders, specifically employers that have 1 to 499 employees. Okay. So that's what we're talking about specifically. One employee, and we're talking W-2 employees, not independent contractors who you issued that 1099 to, but a W-2 regular employee. So when leaders are making decisions about how to offer pay for employees who may contract COVID or have a family member that contracts COVID and they need to care for that family member, there is an option right now for those small business employers to pay sick leave to their employees and take a tax credit for it. We might remember back in the earlier days of COVID. So if we think way back, it feels like 1,000 years ago, but I mean, April 1st of 2020. Okay. Way back then, there was the implementation of a mandatory COVID paid sick leave for the same size small business employer, 1 to 499 employees. At this point, the way that the law has evolved and changed over the last year, this particular type of paid sick leave is optional. So employers are not mandated to provide this type of paid sick leave. So that's an important distinction. We started out last spring, a year ago, with the requirement that all employers offer this type of pay. And that's evolved today where we are May 20th, 2021, International HR Day. Thanks for having me on this particular day. I know, right?
I planned that.
Thanks. So shout out to all my HR professional friends who have made it this far. It's been an incredible year, and we have been riding this wave of changes, modifications, and updates to rules like COVID paid sick leave now for over 13 months. But essentially, so item number 1, if you have 1 to 499 employees, this may be of interest to you. Okay, it's optional at this point. The great thing about offering this COVID paid sick leave covered under the current law is that you get to claim a tax credit dollar for dollar on the amount of paid leave that you pay out to your team member, your employee. So if they do contract COVID or they're having symptoms and they're getting tested and treated, they may be eligible for COVID paid sick leave. So there are a handful of reasons that an employee who works for an employer who's adopted this optional policy to pay COVID sick leave that they may qualify to use some COVID paid sick leave. So again, if they are having symptoms, they're getting tested and waiting for results, they would be eligible for pay under this policy. Great. If they test positive themselves, they would be eligible. And we're talking about up to 80 hours in the benefit year. And so the benefit year, it may have just started over again for a lot of employers. We do now have some flexibility in terms of how we build out the benefit because it's not mandatory. So some employers decided when the new law was passed early in this year, 2021, to just start over and offer their employees a new bank of 80 hours. Some employers said, well, Niki, you used 20 hours last year when you had a COVID scare, and so you have 60 hours left. So employers that are interested in developing a policy like this in order to capitalize on that tax credit would want to work to develop a custom policy for their organization. The U.S. Department of Labor has some great information on their website for those go-getters, small business leaders who want to do the research and craft a policy on their own. And if you have an HR professional in your network, somebody like me that travels out and about and really looks at size of the company, location, and what's practical for a business in terms of offering a leave benefit, you might dig in with someone who is a specialist in developing this type of policy. So either an HR professional or a labor and employment attorney. So
yeah, and we'll put some links in the description box below to try to get you some resources for anybody who's either interested in just doing their own research or maybe reaching out. So that's really helpful from kind of the higher level context. Now you said number of employees from 1 to 499. What about S Corp owners who they are a W-2 employee, but they're also an employee owner? Are they eligible under this, even if they have no other employees? It's just a single employee.
Yep. So I have heard of small business owners in that situation claiming the tax credit. I haven't heard that there's been any enforcement or fallout from that, because the rule is that if the employee is paid W-2 wages, that's how we calculate the amount of leave that they're eligible, or the amount of pay that they're eligible for their leave.
Okay.
So there are no exclusions that we can find that are evident or obvious. And so that would be a possibility. I would be careful just to say that, of course, don't be more gracious or lenient and try to go outside of what's allowed under the rule. There are some pretty strict guidelines for how to qualify for this leave, because it is tied to that tax credit and the government's not giving up their tax money easily.
Exactly. Yeah. And we don't push any sort of super extreme, creative accounting over here.
No.
So when it comes to so that's helpful. I mean, I know that there's a lot of even super small businesses that maybe even have like a couple part-time employees. Does it matter if it's a part-time or a full-time employee here?
Nope, that's a great question. As long as they're earning W-2 wages, they are eligible for pay under this type of policy. So any part-time, full-time, temporary, if they're earning wages in your business as a regular employee, then they would potentially qualify.
Okay. What about caps on total amounts that you can pay? Because I mean, I know like with the PPP program, we had, hey, we're not going to be paying out more than $100,000 annualized salary. Is there anything like that we should be considering?
Yeah, there is an overall cap on the amount of paid sick leave that an employer would be eligible to claim the tax credit on, and it's around $10,000 per employee. Okay. So what we do is look at their earnings calculation. It's not simple, but it's not terribly complicated either. So again, for those employers that are interested in implementing this type of optional policy in order to claim the tax credit, you'd want to dig in on the rules for calculating pay, because we actually take a look at the employee's previous wages for the last 90 days, so the last quarter, to calculate what's called a regular rate of pay based on the number of hours that they worked. That regular rate of pay is what we use to pay out up to 80 hours or up to the max of around $10,000 per employee. And that's the amount of the credit. So if you end up paying an employee more than what is allowed under the paid sick leave rule, that's okay, but you can only claim the tax credit on the allowable amount. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. And then that kind of goes into practically how do we claim these credits? Like, what do we do? I mean, I know if I had an employee right now who needed to take some sick leave, I have a sick leave policy. I use Gusto for my payroll. So I can go in and we can put in a number of hours of sick leave directly there. So is that how we claim this tax credit then? Or how do we claim those hours as being COVID pay related? Would we go into our payroll system?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's exactly what you do. So if we start out by going into our payroll system and making sure that we have an earnings code related to COVID paid sick leave. So there are many dozens of states now across the country that mandate paid sick leave, just as a general rule, right? So we've navigated that for years. This is different. So if you already have paid sick leave or already have PTO, please understand that you should create a new earnings code, because what will happen when your employee calls upon this particular type of leave, it'll be tracked separately. You'll have a separate earnings line for it. And that way, as your payroll company or your accounting team helps you prepare your 940, 941s over the course of the year, it shows up properly so you can claim that tax credit. But the neat part is that when you're working with a payroll company like Gusto, they're taking that owing. So what the employer would owe in employer income tax on the employer side, they're taking it off right there. And so they're reducing your tax liability pay period by pay period. Yeah. Based on the amount of time that you have in that particular earnings code. That's why it's important to set up a COVID paid sick leave earnings code so that they can help you do that.
Yeah. And we're doing that real time. So what that does is that helps us with cash flow right now. Yes. Because yes, we're going to be paying out that employee, but we're not having to pay some additional taxes, like some employer taxes, because this is how we're getting that credit back.
Right. So, and in the beginning, when it was mandated leave, that was super important, because I'm thinking of the folks that I work with on a regular basis, and we were seeing up to thousands of dollars, per pay period being paid out in COVID paid sick leave for folks who were unfortunately not well, or their family member was not well. Yeah. So that did take the edge off of having to offer it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, this is, again, like you mentioned, it's optional. So employers can decide whether or not they want to offer it. But I mean, and if you are able to, think about if somebody's sick and they know they're getting paid, they're not going to be maybe trying to come to work when really they shouldn't be. Or, maybe if they're getting rest and they're staying home, maybe they'll be back a little bit faster. There's lots of reasons to be offering this type of leave. And especially like if you're trying to encourage your employees to maybe go and get the vaccine, this can also cover both the time to actually go and get the vaccine, right? But then it can also, if they have symptoms afterwards, this can cover that as well.
Yeah, that was a phenomenal update. Yeah, that was a phenomenal update to the qualifying reasons for leave, that, when we saw the shift into it being an optional policy for employers. They did add that qualifying reason being, I'm taking time off to get the vaccine, or I'm having symptoms or side effects from the vaccine. That can also qualify under this policy. And just as a side note, I know of several employers that are not using the tax credit right now for their own reasons, but they are offering their employees some paid time off to get the vaccine because they personally feel that it's something that they want to encourage. Sure. And so just as a side note, employers are allowed to create policies like that in order to facilitate a benefit that's valuable to their team and create a workplace that people love. So even outside of this, employers should be considering creative sick leave, creative time off options that really meet their employees' needs at this time. We want to stay competitive. We want to retain great people. And we know in the world of HR that people are looking for new jobs. So please don't, if you're a small employer out there, know that your employees are looking. And so we have to be thinking about ways to offer them benefits, perks, and pay that is competitive, short and long term. So into this next calendar year, as we continue to navigate the end of the pandemic and beyond that, how do you create a company that is attractive and enjoyable for your employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what we're seeing for employees, probably what you're seeing maybe more so directly than me is, the comprehensive package of benefits becomes more important than just salary. Salary alone is one thing, but offering these other, available leaves and things like that can make a big difference for somebody's decision making.
Absolutely. Yeah, leave and workplace flexibility. And, I see a lot of employers right now looking at, and this is a totally different topic, but something that in the world that you work in terms of helping folks with their financial position for their organization, technology reimbursements are on the top of the list of things that employers are thinking about embedding into their budgets for 2022, when before lots of folks were skating by and saying like, well, I'm going to have my employee use their own cell phone, but I'm not going to require that. I'm not going to reimburse them unless it's required by state law or local ordinance or whatever. But at this point, employers are seeing it as something to add potentially into their ongoing budget. So that's something you would be seeing more than me. I know we're making policies for it. I don't know how it's impacting the bottom line so much, but I know employees want it and they value it.
Yeah, I mean, what I did with a couple new hires that I had recently is I was offering a credit for getting your home office set up. You know, just like, what do you need to make yourself comfortable at home, because we're working from home so much. So I thought that was kind of like, it's not necessarily, a huge amount of money, but it can be such a big thing to overall work satisfaction if you feel like you've got, the monitors you need and like a comfortable keyboard and everything, comfortable chair, all that type of stuff.
So, I mean, I think that just having some awareness that this exists is a great step for employers who've been thinking about it, and knowing, that you have the option to opt in right now too. If you haven't been doing it up until this point, if you haven't had a COVID paid sick leave policy in place and you haven't been claiming the tax credit, you can take a look at how you've processed your payroll, how you've categorized your pay. I would encourage folks to work with their tax professional to see what it would look like if they had to amend their tax filings from previous quarters. But we have until September 30th, January, February, March, September has 30 days. So we have until, this particular version of the law is set to expire at the end of September 2021. And so again, if you're an employer who hasn't taken advantage of this option yet, go ahead and think about doing it until it expires or until it's updated. Again, as we know in this COVID time, it may get extended. And the other thing that we know is from a legislative perspective, federal level, so overarching, we see new legislation that is addressing paid family sick leave moving along. I think there's an appetite for a conversation at the national and federal level from a wage and hour perspective to think about how do we continue to offer these paid sick leave benefits or paid family leave benefits to employees. And how do we craft a tax program that makes sense to fund it? And I know for your part, you're in the state of Washington, right, where there already is a paid family leave program in place, and employers contribute to that, and it helps people along in terms of their ability to take time off of work and not have to feel that severe hit to the pocketbook. But you have to fund it, so there's so much to think about. But we know there's an appetite for it, so this might be a good way for any small business to start to work toward offering some paid sick leave benefits. If you're not already, at least you get the tax credit for now.
Yeah. And, that kind of goes into like the whole understanding the full cost of hiring somebody new. I think that's one of the things that I'm always talking to clients with is just like, okay, can I afford to hire? Well, it's not just the salary, it's all these other things. The paid sick leave is one of those things that you may not necessarily, it may not cost you anything. It's kind of like it's there, that may cost you something if somebody uses it, but it might not at the same time. It's kind of like whether or not somebody's actually sick and they take
and depending on the structure of your pay for your particular team, if you have a salaried employee and you offer them paid sick leave, you've already budgeted for the salary. Now you get a tax credit on that. It becomes a little bit more expensive when we have employees that we need to replace in the workforce on a given day. So like think retail operations, warehouses, those types of, hospitality, restaurant. If Hannah calls out, Niki has to come in or customers don't get served. And so I'm paying Hannah for sick leave and I'm paying Niki to work. And now that tax credit really comes in handy.
Yes. Yeah. Because then you're able to kind of maintain status quo of like, well, it's kind of only like you were paying one person because that person you had to pay extra is now. That makes sense. So, okay. That's super helpful. What about now if somebody's just finding out about this, maybe they had no idea, and then they are watching this video and they're saying, oh, like I had somebody last month have COVID and I paid them for a week of time or maybe 2 weeks of time. Potentially they can go back and still claim this credit, right? We would probably suggest them work with their payroll provider to amend, a payroll report and get the right tax code or get the right earnings code, right? That's the right thing. So what I've been seeing from payroll providers is getting notifications. Like I logged into Gusto and they said something about, COVID pay, sick pay leave, like, learn more here. So I'm seeing this from other payroll providers as well. So
Yes.
all payroll providers should be well versed in this, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. My payroll provider in particular, they have like this snazzy calculator that is embedded into the back end of their system too, that calculates regular pay, does all this really great reporting. So there are, payroll companies have really come up with creative solutions to get us organized with our data and help us calculate accurately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's sometimes half the battle really here is knowing where to go. Who can help us with this? And we're totally seeing that with PPP, which then everybody was just passing the buck. But I think we can clearly see here that payroll providers are a good resource if you need to go. And then also HR professionals, if you're looking to establish policies or you're trying to understand like a bigger picture, trying to design a larger compensation package or trying to design that larger, how do we make our employees more happy, I guess, at the end of the day, and satisfied with working at your company. Anything else we should know about this?
I could be here all day talking about this stuff. So I think we did well. I think we got people a good introduction in case they haven't heard about it, or if they've been thinking about taking action and haven't yet, they've got some action items to look at. So I'm just hoping that folks that are out there and they're wondering if I can still do this, can I do it, that they understand, yes, you can. Small business leaders have so much on their plate. We can't always keep up with every moving part of our business. And this is something that has changed so many times that I think lots of people have been like, oh, just forget about it.
Right.
But even if there's a way to use it, I'm so grateful that from a public health perspective, our communities seem healthier. We have less people that would need this kind of leave, but there are still folks that would. I have clients right now with employees that are out with positive COVID results or caring for a family member who's ill. So it's still, it happens. I can't wait until, the time when we don't need this anymore and we've learned so much through it, but it's here now. So if it's something that makes sense from a financial perspective and from a workplace culture perspective, then let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Niki. Really appreciate you being on. And again, if anybody wants to reach out to Niki, her information will be in the description box below. And thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, pleasure to be with you, Hannah. I love talking to you.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.